Our hero's name is Qin Tian, and he is a handsome, lazy immortality seeker. All the girls are delighted with the blue-haired guy. He is so handsome that every time they see him, they feel as if their world is being turned upside down. They all want to kiss him, but hardly anyone will succeed. Today is the day of initiation of new students into the sect, and every major faction leader is vying for the newest recruit. This time the blonde girl made it to the top, surrounded by everyone trying to win her over. The leader of the sect herself admired the girl and said that she wanted her to become her student. The sect leader was refined, and it was unlikely that any man would refuse her invitation. However, the girl did not like that she was recognized, and she did not want to join this beauty sect. She pointed her finger somewhere and said that she wanted to join Hidden Sword Peak. The leaders of all the sects were shocked, and tears welled up in their eyes. How could such a beauty refuse to strive for perfection? Will she really allow herself to do whatever she wants? The girl was deeply embarrassed by the handsome guy, who, in turn, was unhappy with what happened because it was not part of his plans. For several years he studied ways to do nothing and still get everything. Training someone wasn't really his thing. He would rather do nothing. The girl with the big melons angrily hit him on the head because she didn't find him particularly attractive, and he took away her dream student. No matter how unpleasant it is for our hero that he can no longer be lazy, now he will have to demonstrate all his strength and teach the girl everything he knows. It was a beautiful day and birds were flying over the building, dropping their feathers. Everything around seemed to glow with carefree joy. Only our hero cultivated the land with a hoe, despite the fact that he was an experienced warrior who was not obliged to do this. He sighed with relief, straightened his hair, and wiped the sweat from his face. He concluded that the 108th peony field was now complete. A virtual window appeared in front of him with a message that our hero had received a new award. He stared at the screen, completely confused as to what it meant. The only thing he understood was that something had reached the 9th level. With a puzzled expression on his face, he continued to press his finger on the screen, trying to understand how much his power had increased. The system opened a window displaying its attributes. This showed that our hero had 3 stars in strength, 4 stars in speed, and 1 star in intelligence. With only 1 star on his IQ rating, he realized he wouldn't impress anyone. He didn't like this very much. Suddenly our hero became thoughtful, and an image of a girl, presumably his beloved, appeared in his mind. He promised himself that he would find her and surprise her, because everything he did for her. This is the true meaning of love. He imagined his hoe in the image of a girl and directed all his confessions towards her. He began to lean towards the farm tool, trying to kiss it. From an outsider's point of view, it looked very strange and unusual. The girl who witnessed this also thought that her brother and mentor had gone crazy. She was too beautiful, dressed in a long blue robe, and her eyes shone with a bright light that illuminated the world. Our hero was deeply confused, realizing that he had made a fool of himself. The sister and mentor completely misunderstood the situation. When our hero tried to justify himself, opening his eyes wide and throwing away the hoe in order to completely forget about it, she did not listen to him. Instead, she gently stroked his cheek with her hand and slowly brought his face closer to hers. Before he could speak, she hugged him to her chest like a mother hugs her son. She said that her little brother had grown up, and from now on she would often keep him company. Our hero, of course, liked this treatment and warm welcome. Every second it became more and more difficult for him to breathe. Having escaped from her embrace, although I'm not sure that this pleasure can be called captivity, the guy got very angry and started shouting at the girl, who had no idea what he didn't like. She tried to calm him down, and he told her it was wrong. To this she put her finger to his lips and said that she understood perfectly well what he wanted to say, but it made absolutely no sense. Our hero's face changed for the better, and he looked at the girl with kind eyes. The girl felt very awkward and openly hinted at intimacy to the guy. She believed that he had matured, standing on the top all alone, and it was difficult to bear being alone on a quiet night. However, our hero did not share this point of view, and such conversations angered him. In his opinion, the girl did not understand anything at all. Having calmed down a little, he asked his sister if she had come today for some reason or just wanted to distract him from his business. With a sweet smile, the girl turned to him and expressed how unpleasant his words were. After all, he wasn't busy and could take some time to listen to his sister. She told him that everyone who joined today as an adept was allowed by the sect leader to come to our hero. The girl pressed herself even closer to him, and he, in turn, pulled away with an unfriendly expression on his face. She continued her story by saying that after his sister left and he became the leader of the peak, he refused to be an adept, which raised many questions from the sect leader. Our hero did not want to take responsibility, and said that teaching people is very difficult. He attended the meeting only for appearances, so that he would be left alone. They set off because the guy decided that arguing now was not a good solution. He told his sister that he wanted to change clothes and she should wait outside. The girl persisted in her attempts to approach the guy and said that she wanted to change clothes with him, implying some interesting subtext. However, her plans were not destined to come true. Two hooded figures stood at the base of the mountain, discussing recent events. The sacred maiden had fled to the sect, and now the leader had to make a decision that could have serious consequences. We get to see their faces up close, but it doesn't make much sense because half of their faces are hidden in shadows, and we can only make out the dragon patterns on their hoods. As it turned out, they were students of a demonic sect and were planning something. In the courtyard of the great palace, everything was prepared for the ceremony. The clouds hung low and the sun moved closer to the earth, as if it wanted to witness the event itself. The beautiful girl who was the leader of the sect sat on the throne, radiating superiority over mere mortals with her entire appearance. It seemed that nothing could surprise her, but then a familiar young man with long blue hair and a book in his hands appeared around the corner. It was impossible to say that his arrival delighted the girl. He looked at the leader with a confident look, and his long hair fluttered in the wind. He clutched the book to his chest as if someone was trying to take it away from him. The girls went crazy when they saw him. He was their idol and deified figure. A sophisticated aristocrat and a gallant gentleman, there were no words in the world that could adequately describe him. The male sect members were not very happy with this guy. How dare he come to the ceremony? And how, with his abilities, did he manage to join the sect when he was completely useless? Our hero did not pay attention to this, defiantly took out a book and began to read it. It was written on the back of his head that he didn't like what was happening, and if we had read the cover, we would have understood why. The book was about finding 1,000 ways to do nothing. The sect leader became furious and hit the guy on the head. How could he embarrass her in front of such a large audience? How could the formidable leader of Sword Peak stoop to being a fool every day? This behavior only brought shame to them all. Our hero was confused because the girl who had just hit him let him come. He scratched the back of his head guiltily, and tears welled up in his eyes. This angered the beautiful maiden even more. She burst into flames, and it seemed that no one could put it out. A whip appeared from somewhere in her hand, and our hero realized that everything was not as simple as it seemed. He might not leave here alive today. Suddenly something soft and warm fell on his head. He had no idea what it was and his eyes widened like footballs. The girl's chest was pressed against him and did not show the slightest intention to move. She came to protect our hero from the wrath of the enraged leader. She hugged her brother tightly and began her story with a big smile on her face. She said that if thousands of years ago her sister became the sole ruler of the realm of holiness, and if she took a liking to her brother, then naturally he had exceptional insight and something extraordinary. The leader asked her to mind her manners and not defend this boy because he can speak for himself. Our hero found himself caught between two fires. On the one hand, he was pressured by his sister's arguments, and on the other hand, the leader's arguments were obvious. On the third neutral side were people who condemned him and looked at him as an enemy of the people. The men could not understand how someone could not strive to improve. They were deeply excited that all the beauties chose our hero. They grabbed their heads, unable to understand how this could happen. In the end, his charm was so effective that no girl could resist him. They stood there, clenching their fists and gnashing their teeth in anger. Although deep down they understood that they could not do anything, and their anger would not change anything. The beautiful leader raised her hand, signaling the start of something important. With this gesture she wanted to attract the attention of everyone nearby, and she succeeded. She announced that the trial begins now. 3 lines formed, each of which was directed towards 3 magical spheres. The nature of the trial was completely unclear, although one could guess what was happening. Some were delighted to have passed by, while others, fighting back tears, argued that the whole thing was unfair, since a simple ball could not know anything. The white-haired man standing next to the magic ball did not pay any attention to the complaining men. He simply beckoned the girl to come to him to take the test. Such tender and lovely lips were hard to find. They were very exquisite. Their color was comparable to a freshly blossomed rose. Her soft and smooth skin glistened in the sun, charming everyone who was nearby. Her eyes were even more expressive than her smile. Her figure was magnificent from all sides, attracting the attention of all the men present. No one could resist her, and they considered her the embodiment of beauty, a goddess. 2 guys standing nearby were enjoying her beauty, when suddenly one of them hit the other. He just wanted to check if his friend was sleeping because he started muttering about how this girl belongs to him. Everyone understood perfectly well that this was impossible, since they were too ordinary for her. The girl came closer and put her palm on the ball. The man standing opposite her admired her beauty with every second. Her hair fluttered in the wind, attracting even more male attention. She was stunning, although she didn't pay attention to anything. Suddenly the ball changed its color to bright blue, and the girl felt a pleasant pulsation in her hand. It seemed that the ball was sending her some kind of signal, and what happened next surprised everyone. Something incomprehensible burst out of the ball, resembling either a dragon or a bird. It would have been nice to take a closer look, but the creature continued to fly higher and higher, leaving a trail of blue energy behind it. Everyone present was shocked, and even our hero turned away from his study of the ways of doing nothing and turned his gaze to the creature. The sect leader was the first to realize what was happening. It was the blood of the icy wind, and it was clear that this girl had some incredible power. She continued to stand in her place as people quickly surrounded her. Everyone wanted to have a person with such abilities. Less than 3 seconds had passed before the girl had no chance to escape from the encirclement. The sect leader was the first to propose her candidacy. She believed that the girl had extraordinary abilities that could help the world, and she was obliged to join their sect. The girl didn't answer at all, she just continued to look down as if she didn't understand anything. We all understand that her silence meant only one thing. She politely refused. The girl was puzzled because she was the leader of the best sect in the area. She took this rejection to heart. However, everyone else present understood that if the girl refused the leader, they would have a small chance of taking her for themselves. They surrounded her like vultures and began listing the benefits of their sections. They tried to impress her, hoping that she would choose them. It seemed that the girl had never received so many compliments per minute. Men praised her skill with a sword, composure, and fighting stance. Everyone was ready to fight for her, but the girl seemed to be in a trance, staring into space. The sect leader said that the girl should choose the sect she wants to join, because no one could do it without her. Her abilities surpassed those of everyone present. Coming out of her trance, the girl's beautiful eyes focused on the handsome guy reading a book. Her gaze showed interest and perhaps love at first sight. This was typical for many girls. She continued to stare intently into our hero's face, and at some point he noticed this. He looked at the girl with a puzzled expression, completely not understanding what she wanted from him. She continued to point at our hero and said that she wanted to be with him, and he would teach her everything he knew. Apparently the hormones got to her head and she believed this was the love of her life. She had no desire to waste her time on old people. Our hero's eyes widened in amazement. He thought he had just come to observe, but now he had already been appointed her coach. It was absolutely wrong, and it shouldn't be that way, but it's unlikely that anyone will ask his opinion. As it turned out, our girl's story began in a very interesting way. Her name is Miao Lin, and in her past life she was an empress renowned in legend for her cruelty. A beautiful woman lying on the ground was surrounded by men who looked at her in bewilderment. But in the Third Empire, she encountered a strong man who betrayed and killed her. It was painful and insulting because she trusted him as a brother, and he was capable of doing this to her. But now we are not talking about that at all. Reincarnated into her new life, she narrowly avoided being turned into a demonic sect leader's immortality extraction cauldron. He wanted to use her and her powers for his own purposes. However, she managed to escape and join the sect of our heroes. Her plan was to join a cult with some earthly weakling, and our hero, she believed, fit this criterion perfectly. She just needed to hide her true identity, and with the help of the notes of supreme impartiality, she would undoubtedly be able to reclaim her empire. It turned out that her plan was very cruel, and she was a two-faced person hiding behind her unearthly beauty. Once she accomplishes what she plans, she will destroy everyone. But now she realizes that she has no choice but to train with these mere mortals. Overwhelmed by despair, she rested her head on her hand, feeling that this ordeal would be eternal. Our hero took the girl to a room where she would probably stay for now. The frightened dog ran deeper into the room, forgetting about the unfinished business. The cleanliness left much to be desired, but our hero did not pay attention to it. However, the girl ran her finger across the table, leaving a clean trail behind her. It seemed as if all the dust from the table had landed on her finger. It seemed that our hero should have cleaned himself up before bringing the girl here. But he just laughed lightheartedly, waving his arms and saying that, in his opinion, this room was ideal for a girl. The girl was shocked, because now she did not want to spend much time in this room. Maybe men are not taught hygiene, or are they just too lazy to clean up after themselves? Suddenly a strong smell hit her nose and she began to sneeze. This situation greatly upset our hero, or rather, scared him, and he rushed to help the girl. He reached out his hand to her face, really wanting to help her. There was absolutely no ulterior motive behind this, just friendly help for a beautiful girl. He gently touched her cheek and began stroking her hair. There was a complete breakdown in the girl's brain, and she did not understand what was happening. She just raised her finger to her mouth and looked at our hero with great surprise and fascination. She thought he was very attractive at that moment, but when she finally realized what was happening, she jumped back as if scalded, shouting at our hero that he touched her all over, and now she felt ashamed. Our hero stood there in complete bewilderment, because he did not mean anything bad, he only wanted to do what was best. He looked at the girl with a dissatisfied look, obviously trying to awaken a feeling of guilt in her, and show that it was not his fault, but hers. As he himself explained, there was dirt on the girl's face, and he wiped it off so that she would no longer sneeze or feel uncomfortable. There was absolutely nothing terrible or wrong about it. On the other hand, the girl jumped back several meters and pressed herself against the wall. She felt very embarrassed about what had just happened and begged the boy not to come near her. She was such a gentle and beautiful girl. Tears flowed from her eyes like diamonds, instantly dissolving into thin air. In this state, she looked even more stunning than without tears. Our hero was not impressed, and he decided that he had had enough of these games. He began to walk away from her with a solemn expression on his face, and told her that since she recognized him as her teacher, she should follow the rules that he sets. The girl did not hear any of this. She was very worried about the fact that in her past life, other men did not even dare to look at her, and this insolent guy groped her from head to toe. Burning with shame, the girl drew her sword, apparently to behead her tormentor. Our hero raised his finger in the air, and the girl promised herself that as soon as she regained her perfection, she would cut off his head. Meanwhile, our hero continued to pose as an important person. Firstly, he was a very busy man because growing vegetables and watering flowers took up a lot of his time, and he might not have enough time to teach her. While wiping the dust off the table, or rather just scattering it into the air, our hero said that his second rule was to give her small tasks from time to time. The girl promised herself to cut off the boy's entire hand, not just a finger, if he dared to tell her what to do. He sat on a chair with his arms crossed and asked the beautiful lady if she really wanted to train with him because it would be very difficult, and she might not like it at all. He pretended that he was too important, and it would be difficult for a girl to be with him. He really hoped that she would refuse this cooperation. However, the beauty simply bowed to him, going down on one knee, showing her respect. She said she wanted to study and train, and would follow all instructions and orders. In her mind, she decided that when the time came, she would cut off both of her teacher's hands. Our hero was amazed because the girl bowed to her teacher with a weapon in her hands, which was an expression of absolute disrespect. Signs denoting his achievements began to appear before our hero's eyes. He was congratulated for acquiring a wonderful student, because this girl who had reincarnated as an empress must have been well trained by him. He mastered new sword techniques and elite imperial weapons. The level of all his acquired skills was increased. He got so many useful things thanks to the girl. He rejoiced at his rewards like a child, and he did not care who his student was. It didn't matter what kind of reincarnated empress she was, he now had everything he could dream of. He started jumping around the room like crazy and singing songs. It all seemed like a dream to him, and everything he received was really received. The girl realized that it would be quite difficult to study with such a teacher, but our hero did not particularly care, and he continued to rejoice. He suddenly stopped and landed on the ground with a serious look on his face. He cleared his throat into his fist and told the girl that since she recognized him as her teacher, he was obliged to tell her everything. The girl obediently clasped her hands behind her back and listened to him. A mini vortex appeared in the boy's hand, seemingly out of nowhere. As untalented as our hero was, he seemed to have some skills. From this whirlwind something unusual emerged. More precisely, the boy handed the girl a sword in a beautiful golden sheath. It sparkled brightly and attracted people's attention. But since there were only 2 people in the room, the sword did not achieve the desired glory. The girl was shocked that a mere mortal could get such a good and important item, and she looked at the sword with eyes full of pleasure and calm. As she pulled the sword from its sheath, her eyes shone even brighter. It was the same sword that lay perfectly in her hand, illuminating the room with its white light. The blade had a beautiful bluish pattern that radiated energy. Hearts appeared in the girl's eyes with delight and joy. At some point, her face was distorted beyond recognition, and she realized that it was an elite imperial weapon that was not given to just anyone. And now such an instrument was entrusted to her. The girl looked at the sword with amazed eyes, and it seemed like a dream to her. She opened and closed it several times to make sure it was real. Our hero reassured her even more and said that this sword really belonged to her. This sword should serve her well and faithfully. Hearing the word good, the girl grinned and said that our hero would not die from boasting. She was a weapons professional and knew a lot. For example, she knew that the immortality elixir mundane weapon technique was divided into stages, such as gold, black, earthly, heavenly, imperial, and august, and each level was further divided into low, middle, high, and highest rank. Last time she faced death precisely because she owned a low-grade weapon. As she died, her sword sank into the sea against the sunset, and perhaps if she had been able to reach it, things would have been completely different. But life is sometimes unfair. She looked at the boy with a kind look, and her eyes shone brighter than earthly diamonds. She asked our hero if they had ever met before, because he was very kind to her, and she believed that they had met somewhere before. The boy scratched the back of his head and said that he did not see anything unusual in his behavior at all. He just wanted to give his student a welcome gift, just like a teacher would. The girl said that she was very pleased, but perhaps it was not necessary. Of course, she said this out of politeness, but our hero took it to heart. He looked at the girl displeasedly and told her that if she didn't want this, she could return the sword to him, because he absolutely did not like this attitude. He needed a sword, and as a welcome gift he could give her his old socks, which had been lying around for a long time. The boy made a gesture with his fingers, meaning give me the sword, and everything will be fine. But the girl yelled at our hero and said that she didn't need his old socks, but she would keep this beautiful sword for herself. The girl was extremely embarrassed by such a gift and could not deny that she was pleased. She closed her eyes in pleasure and seemed to decide to bite her finger. She has already begun to think about her plan to destroy our hero. She will tie him up first and then think about what to do next. Suddenly, a drop of blood from the finger she had bitten fell onto the blade of the sword. The blue blade instantly began to turn into a bloody piece of metal. Inexplicable metamorphoses began to occur, and the girl could barely hold onto the sword. Blue sparks and streams of energy began to emanate from him, instantly filling the entire room. The girl's amazed look was very sincere, and her face was covered with sticky sweat from fear, but this did not make her any less beautiful. She didn't understand why this was happening, but the sword absolutely did not obey her and continued to live its own life. An extremely powerful energy was released and the roof of the small house they were in collapsed. An orange column of energy erupted from the building and soared into the sky. It seemed that he was almost reaching outer space. The sky darkened, and even the sect leader, who was resting peacefully in her room, could see this beam of energy from the nearby mountain. The energy was so powerful that it awakened a dormant force. A giant orange eye opened, signaling that everything could end at any moment. The monster had awakened and was ready to be destroyed. Somewhere high up sat a mysterious red-haired girl and looked into the distance. She also witnessed the anomaly that occurred. She understood perfectly well where this was coming from, and her main goal was to punish the perpetrators. She found all this very intriguing, and she promised herself that when the time came, she would visit this sect. With one wave of his hand, our hero managed to make sure that the energy beam no longer bothered people. This was very unusual, and the girl was no less surprised than I was, since he was able to stop such an uncontrollable flow of energy without much effort. And sure enough, the sky changed its color to blue again, and there were no traces of the events that happened just a few seconds ago. Everyone continued to live their lives, unaffected by anyone. The girl stood with a guilty expression on her face, looking at our hero. Only the remnants of the heated air scattered around. She couldn't understand how he could be so brilliant and powerful. But our hero was not impressed by such attention, and he told her that she should not fool around, because the sect leader noticed this and came to them. The girl looked at the boy with loving eyes and realized that he was too strong for her. He effortlessly extinguished the anomaly without much effort. He simply asked the girl to go outside with him, where the sect leader was descending from the sky. It was quite surprising, but she could fly too, and I wouldn't be surprised if she had abilities similar to our hero's. A beautiful girl with pink hair bowed and greeted her, showing respect, while our hero stood silently, awaiting a reprimand. The sect leader pressed closer to our boy, and he felt something warm in his chest area. Her soft and warm hand rested on his chin, making his heart beat faster. She told him that he should be ashamed and that everything he was doing was wrong. Our hero raised his hands in the air, making sure not to accidentally touch something he shouldn't touch. He asked the sect leader how she dared to act like this, but received absolutely no answer. The girl came closer and closer to him, making our hero feel more and more embarrassed and blush. She asked him if they were responsible for what happened at the top of the mountain with the hidden sword. She began to scold the boy, and with every second her body pressed closer to him. Both of them could only cause such a strong disturbance within the limits of their vital forces. She turned to the girl and asked her if it was true. The disheveled beauty was silent and embarrassed, not knowing how to answer the question. Our hero decided to come to her aid and said that it was just an anomaly, and nothing bad happened. After these words, he was instantly hit on the head with a pipe. The sect leader started yelling at him, saying that he understood absolutely nothing. Eventually, an anomaly appeared on her mountain, and she was afraid that she would now be in trouble since she was in charge of these lands. Our hero began to defend himself and asked the sect leader to calm down. The girl sighed heavily and began to move away from these two, realizing that she would not achieve anything with them. She decided that the best solution to the problem would be to leave. Our hero rubbed the area where he was hit, feeling the pain, while the girl simply watched as the sect leader flew into the air and flew back home. Our hero extended his hand to the girl and ordered her to give him the ice sword, since in her hands it only brought trouble. The girl, looking guilty, handed him the sword without saying a word. She watched as our hero twirled the sword in his hands and admired the fact that he held an elite imperial weapon in his hands that could shake the skies. He himself was magnificent, and with one wave of his hand he could make anomalies disappear. He returned the sword to the girl, and she continued to admire him. The boy straightened his hair without thinking about anything in particular, and at that moment his student was amazed at his beauty and thought that being with him was becoming more and more interesting every minute. Dawn was approaching among the hills. The gentle morning sun gradually obscured the dark sky strewn with stars. As usual in the morning, the roosters were the first to wake up, so we could watch as one of them woke everyone up with his cry. In one of the buildings standing among the hills, if you listened carefully, you could hear not only crowing, but also a sequence of numbers. 7,661, 7,662, and then the phrase appeared that the morning is wiser than the evening. Another count followed, and it turned out to be 7,663. The bird, sitting behind bars in a very strange position, made this count. This poor bird was not only imprisoned, but was also kept close to the fire. It wanted to become very powerful and repeatedly mentioned the need to strengthen itself every day, and then said the number 7,664. The bird dreamed of escaping from the clutches of the demon as soon as such an opportunity presented itself, because it believed that such a beautiful golden raven would undoubtedly have a bright future. But the last figure in the count was 7,666. Suddenly the golden crow was grabbed by the neck. Feathers flew in all directions. Seeing this whole scene, the other golden crows became quiet, and some even huddled together, trembling with fear. Our hero was ruthless. He plucked the bird's feathers with an evil grin and great pleasure. Meanwhile, the bird screamed in pain and called him a heartless demon, later begging him to either become her or rip out her feathers. It turns out that this happened on the territory of a demonic prison. And a few moments later our hero carried the lifeless body of the golden raven on his shoulder. He thought that the meat was quite dense. After all, this was the most disciplined golden crow in the demon prison. Then, after some thought, he came to the conclusion that Miao Lin would eat well today. In a bamboo grove, our heroine, like a fairy tale goddess, was doing her morning workout. The morning breeze blew her incredibly beautiful pink hair. She looked like she was performing some kind of ritual. Miao Lin pulled out her sword from its sheath. She began to think about it as she trimmed the bamboo around her. The girl knew that it was not easy to understand the essence of the ice sword, even with her experience from her past life. At that moment, a woman appeared out of nowhere, shouting the name of our heroine. Miao Lin was unhappy with this behavior, so she replied that she was fasting and would not eat. The teacher appeared out of nowhere, holding a frying pan right next to the girl's sword. And, as usually happens, he said in the tone of a teacher that she should eat. Our heroine thought about when he managed to appear and by what rule it could have been, but anticipating the girl's thoughts, our hero said that this was his rule. At that moment, Miao Lin could not say anything in response. After a while, approaching the table, one could notice the variety of dishes. But the only similarity was that there was meat everywhere, and we know whose it was. Approaching the table, the girl no longer looked so embarrassed and angry. She started praising how delicious it smelled and how filling it might be with that flavor. Hearing all this, our hero grinned slyly, carrying a dish that he called chicken soup. However, the young lady did not appreciate this smile and called it disgusting. Approaching the table, the man began to put everything on plates. He later said that after the girl finished eating, she should be able to break through the first level of the golden body's restriction. After these words, it becomes clear why he killed and cooked the meat of the golden raven. After this, the man brought a plate with the girl's portion. However, for some reason, the girl felt that something was wrong with the teacher, so she asked the appropriate question. The pink-haired girl smelled the soup cooking and began to think aloud about what was happening, specifically discussing the concept of limits. That is, the limits of perfection are divided into such as withdrawal from the world, detachment from the world, living spirit, golden body, nirvana, creation, holiness, divinity in 9 heavens. Each limit is further divided into 3 levels. Having said this, she asked her teacher if he really believed that overcoming limitations was as easy as eating. Without waiting for an answer, the girl started eating. But something clearly went wrong, and the plate of soup fell to the floor with a crash, scattering its contents in different directions. Looking at all this, the teacher grinned and proudly, unable to contain his emotions, exclaimed that something had worked. What exactly it was, we will soon find out. Something was happening to Miao Lin. It was a mixture of pleasure and delight, but she did not understand what this feeling was. However, she knew it was bubbling inside her. The girl seemed to have isolated herself from everyone else, and was in her own world of pleasure. She reflected on the fact that it took 20 or 25 seconds for the blood and heart to complete one cycle. It only takes 5 seconds for this heat to spread. Before she had time to think about it, the girl began to tremble like a leaf. Following the wave of pleasure came a wave of pain. Grasping her fragile shoulders and closing her eyes, she ordered herself to endure. But sometimes cries of pain escaped her. Miaolin knew that she could not hold out for long. She felt as if she was in an icy whirlpool, where at first nothing was clear due to shock, and then the cold penetrates to the bones, leaving no room for positive thoughts. But just a few moments later she felt another wave of pleasure. It seemed to the girl that she was floating among the ice. After all this, she regained consciousness, and everything that managed to get into her mouth at this moment of pleasure, and before that, she spat out on the floor. And then, with tears in her eyes, she squirmed in confusion, wondering if she had really broken through. Watching this whole scene, the teacher thought with pride that this girl was an example to follow. But he quickly woke up from his thoughts and, as if nothing had happened, sat down at the table, attracting attention to himself by coughing. He began to talk about himself in the third person and started talking about how if he said that the soup would help him break through, then it would happen. Otherwise, he would have wasted this three-legged raven king. However, our heroine did not seem to expect to hear such details about the preparation, and she was distracted from her excitement by wondering how he could make soup from the three-legged raven king. All these events took place right at the table where the second pose was to take place. Only the teacher sat quietly there and ate. Miaolin, on the other hand, sat under the table, realizing that this guy definitely did not stop at the limit of his life spirit. Looking at this rather smug face, she realized that he was worthy of her. And with the help of cooking, he could shine and become stronger. Meanwhile, when our hero brought a new portion of food to his mouth, the girl, feeling embarrassed, began to ask something. But just as she began her sentence, the teacher covered her lips with chopsticks. Miaolin was shocked by this action. The teacher began to say that people should always maintain a sense of mystery. For example, he had a secret, and she also had a secret. An awkward silence followed, and the young lady was horrified to realize that our hero knew who she was. However, our hero looked completely serene. After that, he pressed her lips with 2 fingers, perhaps intending to do something with them, but with a mocking intonation in his voice he ordered her to eat everything. Miaolin was furious, but almost immediately he stopped all these actions, and with a feeling of triumph, our hero began to leave, giving the order to clear the table. As for the young lady, she was now crimson with anger and seething alone, being the teacher's guest. In the end, he deceived her again. However, she knew that sooner or later she would cut off his hands. Whether she did it or not, we will find out in the next chapter. Let's move to a snowy valley. It was reminiscent of a picture from a fairy tale, with rocks covered with a white veil, onto which snowflakes gracefully fell. This valley was not as simple as it seemed. It was inhabited by unknown creatures. They all looked like animals, but with human features. One resembled a cross between a monkey and a cat, the other had the features of a bird, but the figure and contours of a young girl. However, the most frightening creature was the one that resembled someone unknown. It had a little bit of everything, but its huge wings and horns were the most terrifying elements. It screamed and complained about a certain man, since he came every day to catch his comrades, and today he found himself in their clutches. One of the monsters offered to stay with him that evening and have a drink, but the girl said how bad he was and that she really liked him, so she offered to do the smart thing and return all the demons he had taken from them. But this man was our hero, and they were furious with him. After listening to everything, he tried to make them worry about their comrades. He assured them that the demons were fine, they had food, water, and even shelter. As for the offer of a drink, he said it was too late for that. After all the comforting words, our hero began to admit why he actually came to them this time. Specifically, he came to borrow the spirit and blood of the demon emperor, and then blatantly declared that the more the merrier, as he wanted to extract everything from them. The bird girl seemed to genuinely have warm feelings for him, as it even sounded romantic to her. But one of her comrades tried to snatch these thoughts from her, shouting that he was going to kill them. The most formidable dragon-like demon was furious. Opening his mouth with sharp teeth and almost tearing the veins on his tense neck, he screamed, asking why he was torturing them so much. Naturally, without waiting for an answer, the battle began. The demon with his staff flew towards our hero, cutting ice and air with his tool. But the sage knew exactly what to do in such a situation. Eventually, on the other hand, another demon was flying towards him, and he wondered when he would get a taste of his staff. Any other person at that moment would have hesitated at best if he had not run away. All this gave our hero great pleasure. He looked like he was there for training. When they all flew up to him, one of the demons asked him for a weapon, but of course he refused. With a grin, he said that he would take everything he needed himself. After a while it became difficult to distinguish anything. The demon that had been flying at him from behind was already standing in front of him. The demon's tool was a kind of staff, and with its help he wanted to defeat our hero, but, as we know, this is very problematic. In an instant, the demon sent all its icy energy towards the man, but he reacted very quickly to the attack. Due to the clash of their energies and the fact that our hero's energy was many times stronger, the demon's staff shattered into pieces. He was furious. If only his yellow eyeballs had burst a little, he would not have been able to understand how this divine Xuanyu could shatter so easily. Our hero is not as simple as it might seem at first glance. He summoned a demon who strictly obeys him and whom they fear, with whom he fights. Thus, this gray and hairy demon turned around, and a fully revealed stone monster appeared before him. This monster resembled a living rock that came to life in an instant. But at the same time, it looked very alive, with icy eyes, nostrils and a closed mouth in which the demon was being chewed. At this moment, our hero stood as if nothing had happened, as if he was not involved in anything. Nuzzling into his ear, he muttered that dealing with him was already good. But while he stood there, thinking, the other monsters stepped aside and seemed hesitant to challenge him to a duel. They were apparently choosing among themselves who would meet their inevitable death next. But our hero didn't want to wait, so he ordered them to attack him because he was in a hurry. The massive orange monster with horns, who looked like a girl, clearly had some advice. He was seething with anger while she seemed very embarrassed. At some point, a dragon-like demon whispered some technique to her, and she agreed, although she sincerely regretted that she had ruined such a beautiful face. In an instant, the two of them combined all their powers, and a snowstorm rose to the skies with a deafening roar within. They both exerted their maximum strength, directing them towards our hero. But it seemed that even with such a menacing movement, he remained unperturbed, standing calmly and taking all the blows without even flinching. The duo who created Blizzard couldn't figure it out. How could he just stand there and do nothing? After this, they assumed that this must be a difficult technique for him. But our hero, as we already know, is very wise, so he gave these demons the opportunity to express themselves, because, fortunately, he also had such abilities. In an instant he dropped to one knee. As if calling upon the power of the earth and gathering all the snow and everything nearby around him, he formed something terrible and huge. It was clear what pleasure he received from all this, and how humbly the magic tongues fluttered around him. He caused the wrath of the heart. After speaking these words, countless ice spheres flew out from his hand, spiraling towards the demons. They were horrified and could not understand how this was possible. And a few moments later, the demons lay lifeless on both sides of the snowy path formed by the swords. Our hero was still standing there with his hand outstretched. The man was happy and tears flowed from his eyes. But after he wiped all the liquid off his face, he thought about how he left a few days ago, and wondered if Miao Lin missed him. And then he realized that he had gained spirit and blood, so it was time to return to the top of the hidden sword. And then he threw something somewhere and was glad that he missed, otherwise there would have been nothing left. At that moment, the smoking package flew towards one of the trees in the hidden ball. This was exactly what our hero threw. A few moments later, something flew into one of the buildings, followed by an explosion, causing the surrounding people to start running away. Miao Lin was walking around the hill area. Naturally, she noticed the smoking building, and then something struck her like an epiphany, and she thought that this room was the pavilion of melting pills, and could it be that he had returned? Indeed, our hero flew into the building. He thought he had only been back for a short time before he caused a commotion. Against the backdrop of fire and smoke, he looked beaten and mutilated. The pink-haired girl, who was now wearing very revealing clothes and looked confused, asked our hero if he was the one who blew up the melting pill pavilion. But it was a very stupid question, given the situation. But our man didn't think so. He didn't even pay attention to it. In the end, he immediately exclaimed when the girl appeared on time. Ignoring the fact that he had come from an unknown distance and direction, and despite the pain of falling, he stood up and impatiently handed her the green pill, ordering her to eat it while it was hot because he had specifically refined it for her. The girl held and looked at the green pill in her palm and was shocked. She exclaimed that this was really the demon emperor's pill, but after saying this, she seemed to really understand the essence of these words. The girl blushed again, but this time from joy and surprise. As she transferred the pill from one palm to the other, she thought that it was a top-ranked pill from the heavenly realm, which, as an empress, was difficult for her to find. But then, when the girl watched our hero try to recover from the fall, she had an epiphany. It was because of this teacher that he was absent all this time. However, feeling his gaze on him, he looked at her with a happy expression on his face and could not understand why she had not eaten him yet. Maybe it was bitter? To this the girl replied that it had nothing to do with taste. She just didn't know if it would be comfortable here. When the teacher turned around, he saw a destroyed building, still surrounded by dust and even crumbling. And then he said with some excitement that it seemed that this place would not be so comfortable after all. They moved to where the girl lived. The girl, without wasting time, swallowed the pill. They both sat down on the bed. While the girl did all this, the teacher gently stroked her back with a feeling of caring. In an instant, the girl burst into flames. Our hero, watching this scene, realized that he only needed to slowly send chi into Miao Lin's body. After all, her condition was normal and this was awakening. Suddenly the girl turned around and grabbed our hero by the shoulders. He clearly didn't expect this. The girl pushed our hero down, positioning herself on top. The atmosphere was definitely not tense. The man was so stunned by what was happening that he could not do anything about it. Suddenly, with tears in her eyes, the girl began to say what she wanted. But what did she want? Our hero clearly wanted to say something, but the girl did not allow him, as she leaned towards his lips and they connected. Our hero was even more confused. Well, what will happen next? Lying above her teacher, the girl began to talk about how she was a time traveler who had gained access to the Lagan, and was now facing a serious crisis of innocence. From the outside it seemed that the man did not understand what was happening, but he still listened carefully. After the girl said this, she trapped the man in such a position that he could not move at all. And then she even said that he couldn't escape anywhere. Hearing these words, our hero was horrified and declared that flirting was strictly prohibited. But she didn't seem to be too interested in her words, because she had already gotten comfortable, and started saying that she didn't intend to listen to anyone and that she really wanted to flirt with him. The man still could not come to his senses. The girl could no longer hold back and began to run her tongue along his neck, enjoying his smell. These actions gave her pleasure, but the man did not feel the same, despite appearances. And it seemed that this had something to do with the Emperor's pill. It was assumed that its effects would soon cease. Then the girl knelt down and hugged the man, strangling him. In an instant, the man responded to the girl's advances. He hugged the back of her head, bringing his face close to hers, knowing that only he could awaken the power in her. The girl did not experience the same happiness from everything that was happening. In an instant, something happened to the girl. She didn't bother her teacher anymore and just acted stupid, but our hero was still unhappy. The girl called him a little dog that always bites, and at the same time tried to reach his teeth. Suddenly, something began to flow from the girl's eyes, and something unpleasant was happening. Our hero realized that it was a success. The girl lost consciousness, but as far as we could understand, this was a good sign. Our hero carried her in his arms and placed her next to the equipment. He read about the system, which said that the owner's disciple awakened the ancient Ice Phoenix bloodline at the Emperor level, broke through to the first level of the Nirvana Kingdom, and the owner's ability was upgraded to 7th grade, and the entry reward was increased by 60%. The man understood that this time the winnings were truly huge. For a moment he was as happy as a child that his innocence was finally unshakable. Sitting down next to the unconscious girl, our hero touched her eyes and face, asking if she had lost consciousness during her awakening. After some time, some action was already taking place in this room. Our hero sat calmly and drank a hot drink. The girl looked very unwell. She was very disheveled and rumpled. The man asked why she wasn't sleeping, and she wanted to say something, but she didn't seem to have the strength. After this, our hero said that since he was a master, he remained pure and innocent, and pointed out that she was the initiator of everything that happened. The man looked extremely happy throughout it all. After a moment of jokes, our hero became serious. He put down the container with its contents, and told Miao Lin to be careful. Well, it looks like your seriousness didn't last long. Because after saying this, he quickly left with a smile on his face and commented that there is indeed a huge difference between a student and a master, but the girl did not understand such a reaction and stared at him questioningly. After all this, the girl began to remember what happened. She didn't understand whether she could do something or not, and suddenly, out of nowhere, strangers appeared who looked and behaved very strangely. But it seems that our heroine knew them, because she was not at all surprised. The girl stood on the porch at night, facing the crowd of people who had gathered around her, wondering if the power of her ancestors had awakened. She looked very embarrassed. The girl nodded her head vaguely and agreed to the question. One girl in the crowd began to enthusiastically talk about the blessed Konglong, explaining that it was the sacred capital, and she was about to receive her sacred kingdom. There was disagreement in the crowd. They began to decide for the girl what she should do next. Some felt that she should not remain at the peak, while others agreed, saying that such talent could not be contained. Some even said that she needed a worthy owner to control her. In short, some offered their proposals while others followed suit. Hearing all this, the girl became angry. After all, it was thanks to her teacher that she was able to awaken this time. This was exactly what she was trying to convey to the people standing in front of her. She ordered them in a commanding tone that if they intended to continue insulting her teacher, then they had nothing to do here and could leave. It seemed that the people standing opposite her did not expect to hear this. They fell silent and stared at the girl. Some even thought that the girl was in love with her master, but they could not understand how this was possible. The chaos was interrupted by a young man flying towards our heroine. He screamed that something bad was happening. People in the crowd tried to encourage each other by talking about maintaining composure and dignity. The tearful young man began to talk about demons and how they were about to attack. Miao Lin was ordered to immediately hide, and the girl obediently obeyed. While everyone was terrified, some people began to ask more about what happened, trying to maintain their composure. The young man who brought this news could not understand why they were surprised by this attack, since the Ice Phoenix's power inevitably attracted demons. No one else had a choice, so they all decided to confront these demons. In an instant, everyone on the mountain gathered together to face the enemy. But when they looked at the sky, they were overcome with horror. There was an endless amount of uncertainty, and it was even scarier than the demons themselves. And in an instant, the demon with whom we are already familiar appeared again. But this time he looked even more menacing than the first time they met, as he came for the Ice Phoenix. And then, staring with his icy gaze, he firmly declared that what he needed was here. But whether he was able to get it or not, we will find out in the next chapter. The creature in the form of a dragon was extremely angry. His eyes burned with hellish red fire. He demanded that people give him the bearer of the Ice Phoenix clan. It seemed that he was just one step away from turning everything around into ashes. His furious roar created a powerful impulse that threw people back, not giving them a chance to get closer to the villain. They had already prepared their swords for battle, but, as I understand it, it was absolutely useless. The girl watched all this with horror, and this also knocked her off her feet. She was a more experienced fighter and understood that the wind that was pushing people away was the aura of the fire dragon demon emperor. Inside her, her heart began to burn and jump out of her chest. She knew that the dragon's aura was resonating within her. This seemed very unusual, and now we must find out the reason for this. Well, at some point it dawned on her, and she was able to understand what was happening. The Dragon Emperor has the same aura as the dragon tribe. The pill the girl drank contains dragon's blood, and when the dragon's blood meets the girl's blood, it awakens the deepest emotions in her heart. It was precisely because two bloods merged inside the girl that she experienced this inexplicable feeling. Because of this, she kissed her master. She had dragon blood running through her veins, and she had no idea what she was doing. Now everything became clear to her, and she decided that she needed to get to the bottom of it, no matter what. She kicked open the door to our hero's apartment, and was ready to find out the whole truth that he was hiding from her. She entered the apartment, wondering if the owner had deliberately done all this to take advantage of her. But when she looked around the room, she saw no one there. At that moment, the sect leader was furious as she did not like the impudence of the imperial dragon to invade their territory and scare the people. Her anger manifested itself in the flames behind her, and it seemed as if she was about to engage in battle with the dragon to show who was in charge. The dragon seemed embarrassed, and no longer so self-confident. The girl stood in front of him, ready for battle, and began to taunt him, saying that he no longer seemed as confident as he used to be. This spurred the villain on, and he clutched the golden axe tighter, ready for an easy fight for him. The two opponents faced each other in what was to become a legendary battle. A mere mortal with incredible strength, or a devil dragon whose physical strength can be envied. Who could emerge victorious? Well, before the fight they decided to talk a little. The girl continued to reproach the dragon, saying that he was weak and incapable of anything. Does he have enough energy and strength to destroy them? To which the dragon also responded with a reproach. Of course, he would not be able to succeed, and the girl would win. Perhaps he wanted to provoke mere mortals in this way. He believed that perhaps the girl was stronger than him, but could she defeat the Emperor Dragon in combination with the Phoenix and Devil Monkey? He had high hopes for them and their help, saying they would arrive within 5 minutes. After this, the pitiful little people would not be able to protect their sect. A less confident expression appeared on the girl's face. There was no trace of her former courage left, and perhaps she was aware of the risks she was taking. She didn't know that there were many imperial demons, and this came as a surprise to her. The demons did not have to wait long and were already descending to the aid of their leader. The monkey blamed Phoenix for being late, saying that they were too slow. According to him, healing could be done later, but now their leader could get hurt. Phoenix calmed him down and said that they had enough time. Meanwhile, our hero flew to the aid of his friends in the frying pan. It looked quite comical, but what would he not do to save the people dear to him? Two demons were flying on a black cloud, as if on an airplane, ready to fight at any moment. Well, how could they fight against someone else if they couldn't solve their own problems among themselves? The monkey looked thoughtfully at Phoenix and asked about the small planes that were following them. Was this just some new fun for Phoenix, or was it something more serious? Phoenix was confused and didn't understand what it was. These little planes were our hero's brilliant plan. One of them flew close to the cloud of villains and seemed to burst into flames. It was only a matter of a few moments before it fully ignited. This is what happened when a powerful shock wave swept across the sky, leaving behind the core of a powerful explosion. It seemed that anyone who was in the air at that moment was in trouble, and our hero had 2 less enemies. But the demons turned out to be resilient, and only their plane was slightly burned by the explosion. The monkey asked Phoenix if she was okay, to which she responded positively. However, no one had any idea what had just happened. What they saw next surprised and angered them even more. Phoenix closed her eyes in amazement, assuming it was just her imagination and that it would disappear when she opened them again. But when she opened her eyes, nothing had changed, and a flying frying pan with our hero sitting on it hovered above them. Yes, he really chose such a peculiar means of transportation. With a relaxed look and arms crossed, he looked at the demons and told them that they had no chance of breaking through his defenses, and their only option was to retreat back to where they came from. The demons became furious because this impudent man greatly irritated them. They stared at him with furious eyes and recognized him as the same guy who injured them last time. On their devilish cloud they rushed towards our hero, shouting that he was a member of this sect and must be destroyed. The guy paid absolutely no attention to them and continued to sit on his frying pan, waiting for the demon's next move. He told them that they were indeed right, and he was a member of the cult. If they guess correctly, they can claim their prize. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the demons decided not to run into trouble and turned around, apologizing to our hero and declaring that they were leaving immediately. The guy asked them, sitting on the frying pan, why they were running away so quickly, because they had not even received their reward. The demon's reward was a golden dragon, which descended from the sky to destroy them. His hand illuminated everything around, and it seemed that it would destroy them without the slightest chance of survival. A large fire whirlwind formed in the place where the dragon's hand landed, while our hero sat carefree on his frying pan, watching it all. There was nothing left of the two demons. They lay in a fiery whirlwind, unable to help their leader. Realizing his victory, our hero simply scratched his ear and began whistling, which for him meant his triumph. He knew that the demonic dragon had absolutely no chance of surviving. Meanwhile, the expected battle never took place, and the dragon stood guiltily before the sect leader with his head down. There was silence for a moment, or maybe even a few moments. The girl interrupted him and told the dragon that almost 30 minutes had passed and his allies still had not arrived. They were completely unreliable, and the dragon was in vain to trust them. Steam was pouring out of the dragon's ears and mouth, and he was furious at the unpunctuality of his friends. It hoped for their help, but they betrayed it, leaving it there to humiliate itself. The supposed battlefield then filled with the same cloud, and the dragon began to believe that he had a chance of victory because his followers had arrived. He angrily flew towards the cloud, declaring that the two would pay for embarrassing him in front of so many people. The girl watched with a proud expression as the dragon was about to be humiliated. Behind her, her students cheered in delight. They were in awe of their mistress, and how she had won the battle without even landing a blow. The dragon sat on a cloud, completely unaware of where his students had gone. He screamed and said that they really betrayed him, and the more he thought about it, the angrier he became. A green frog-like creature handed him a glass of water, and told him that he needed to drink a little to calm down. The dragon turned angrily to the creature, and said that he did not need any tea. If the frog had been stronger, they could have tied this woman together, and would not have been in such a pitiful state. Our hero flew towards them in that same frying pan. He knew the truth very well, but was very modest, so he did not reveal where the other demons had gone.